and we were wrong to send you home. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, you have a bad situation going on. We've just defined that your lungs, both your lungs, are being destroyed. And about 90% of the lungs have been destroyed at this point. You're going to need a double lung operation to be able to survive.
Hey, what's going on, fight fans and entrepreneurs? You're joining us today with Inside the Life of, and today's guest is Major Spencer Harvey. I'm Antonio Perkins, your host. He was enlisted in the Marine Corps, graduated from OCS school in 1974, when he joined the U.S. Army, becoming a second lieutenant and retiring in 1995. His occupation was logistics in supply and maintenance. He also coached youth basketball, and he actually is a city council member in Lancaster, Texas. Not to mention, he actually ran for mayor, and I believe it was last year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Perfect, perfect. Upon that, in the city of Dallas for DART, Dallas Area Transit, you were an executive contract administrator. Is that correct?
That's correct.
A lot of titles for just one person. But to me, I call you Uncle Spencer.
Great.
So when I asked you to write all this down, all of your achievements, when all that came flooding back, what crossed your mind?
Oh, wow. A lot of thoughts crossed my mind. I thought about the experiences that I've been through. I think weighed heavy on me from the standpoint of time flies, and you can't go to sleep on it, because you wake up one moment and it's 5 years later. I just answered your question on the city council, and it came back to me that it wasn't last year. It was a couple of years ago now. We're looking at a new term getting ready to start pretty soon for our mayor. So time flies, and you just have to thank God that you're on top of this earth, because once it's over, it's over. So you do all you can to help others.
And that's the whole purpose of our conversation, because you said once it's over, it's over. And the title of this is Exceeding Your Expiration Date. Sounds a little morbid, but the reason behind that is because when you were 32 years old, you were diagnosed with an illness that at the time was incurable.
Yes.
And I believe it was an infection in your lungs. When you received that news and you were 32 years old, what crossed your mind?
Oh, wow. It was like being hit in the head with a sledgehammer. I had gotten sick. I was actually running, and at that time I could pretty much run marathons. But all of a sudden, in the middle of one of my runs, it was difficult for me to breathe, and I sat down on the ground to try to get my breath together. And I just felt like the Lord told me at that moment, you need to go to a doctor right now, or you can die. And that was like a slap in the face. Like I said, like a sledgehammer hit me, because when I heard the words, and I felt the feeling of God telling me that I could die. And as I was coughing, I was feeling the feelings of not being able to breathe. I had to take it serious and drop everything and go straight to a doctor. And the very first doctor I went into this little clinic, Oriental doctor, looked at me and he said, let me run a couple tests. And after running the test, he said, I think what you have is a condition called sarcoidosis. And he said, don't worry, the word means scarring of the lungs. He said, but it's a mysterious disease in that we don't know a lot about it. So I need to run some more tests. He ran some more tests and sent me on to the military base that I was on and asked me to go to the hospital there. When I went into the hospital there, they put me in isolation. And as they began running tests, I asked, how long was this going to be? And they said, basically, we're just going to continue running tests till we figure this thing out. I ended up staying there for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days in isolation, they basically came to me and they said, we think the first doctor that diagnosed you was correct. So we're going to assume that that's what the situation is, but we have better equipment to look at you and better diagnostic equipment in the capital city. So if you will, we'd like to send you up to the capital city overnight and have them look at you and send you back. And I agreed. And I ended up going to the capital city, Seoul, Korea, and to a major hospital there. And they kept me for another 7 days. And at the end of that 7 days, they said, we're pretty sure that your diagnosis is correct, but there's better equipment to test you in Japan. And we're going to fly you to Japan and have you looked at from the doctors there. So I said, well, now that's 14 days out of my job. How am I going to deal with this? But at the same time, I wanted to know what was going on, but I was starting to feel better. Antonio, the next thing that I realized was I had been flown to Japan. They looked at me for about 6 or 7 days and said the same thing to me at the end, but this time they said, we're going to fly you to Hawaii. I said, Hawaii? They said, Hawaii is part of the mainland and they have much better equipment. They have a giant hospital in the mountain on Waikiki called Triple Army Hospital. And upon arriving there and going through tests there, the doctors basically said, we have determined that we're 98% sure that you have this condition called sarcoidosis. With that being the fact, we're being pressured by your supervisors in Korea to finalize the diagnosis and let them know whether we're going to keep you or send you back to work. And we've determined that as well as you're doing now, we're going to send you back to Korea. So the next thing I know, I was back in Korea on the job. And I continued working for 5 more years in the military, but I was stressed in that for all my physical examinations and physical tests, it became a mental test of managing my body and managing my breath and taking tests. But I was able to retire. And upon retiring, I was feeling pretty good. The VA hospital basically took a look at me and said, we'll continue monitoring your situation. And not until I was coaching youth sports here in the Lancaster area, I started coughing. And with that coughing, I ended up running into the VA hospital to get it checked out. At that time, I had been feeling like I was on top of the world health-wise. But it seemed like each time I turn around, it would be a little something would happen and it would take away some of the things that I was doing. Such as when I first started coaching, I could bounce the ball and tell the players, do it like this. And I started coughing. So I ran over to the VA to get checked out. And I was amazed at what happened because in the middle of the checkup, the doctor said everything looked great. What we're going to do is we're going to take those last couple tests that we did, wait for the results, and we'll call you at home. So they sent me home. My wife and I drove home, and about 15, 20 minutes later, as we arrived in the driveway, we could hear the phone ringing in the house. We came up in the house, picked the phone up. It was the doctors at the VA that basically said, we're sorry, Major Harvey, but your tests have come in, and we were wrong to send you home. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, you have a bad situation going on. We've just defined that your lungs, both your lungs, are being destroyed. And about 90% of the lungs have been destroyed at this point. You're going to need a double lung operation to be able to survive.